there exists a forum beyond that which is known to man. A place that sits between truth and the lies which we choose to believe. A dimension ruled by the shadowy depths of human nature and those who turn a blind eye to it. Submitted for your approval. No sleep. The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. One day, far in the future, or perhaps tomorrow, we'll find out just what we're afraid of, and we might be better off not knowing at all. I remember how the night sky used to look. When I was a kid, my bed had a window at the head of it. I'd lie on my back, looking up past the dense tree line, and watch the stars. I didn't know any constellations past Orion's belt, so I'd just make up my own, connecting the twinkling dots in my head, dreaming of what might lie beyond. I don't remember the last time exactly that I really saw the stars, but at least we know some more about what lies beyond. Just let me explain. When I was a sophomore in college, I took a class about nuclear security. It started off with a basic history, going back to the first atomic bomb. Anyhow, in the context of the Manhattan Project's Enrico Fermi, we learned about the Great Filter. Fermi, an Italian-American physicist, now has his name attached to one of the great unexplainable features of our vast galaxy, or at least what used to be unexplainable. Basically, Fermi noted that despite the fact that it's statistically a near certainty for intelligent life to exist elsewhere in our solar system, we have no evidence of any extraterrestrial visitors, probe or otherwise. I know, we have decades of conspiracy theories, claimed sightings, home videos, science fiction, Hollywood bullshit, the whole nine. But how come nobody had actually bothered to stop by good ol' Earth to greet the new neighbors with a plate of cookies? I mean, I don't think anybody was expecting Mr. Rogers, but it's still been almost 100 years since Fermi asked his fellow physicists that fateful question. Where is everybody? And until recently, nobody really knew how to respond. We tried to answer it, sure, that's how we got the Great Filter theory. Some genius's decades-late response to Fermi. A series of steps required to build intelligent life capable of visiting other intelligent life. It goes something like this. First off, you need the right star system. That includes the necessary organic materials, habitable planetary conditions, the basics. Second, you need molecules that are able to reproduce. Gotta start life somewhere. Third comes simple prokaryotic single-cell organisms, which lead into number 4, complex eukaryotic single-cell organisms. Yep, that's right. Halfway through the list and we're still measuring life in micrometers. Just stick with me. Number 5 on the list is sexual reproduction, I know. Finally the good stuff, which brings us to 6. Multicell life, which eventually evolves into 7. Our hairy, big-brained, tool-wielding ancestors, bringing us to number 8 on the list, the present. An advanced, intelligent species capable of technological advancement and space exploration. And finally, number 9. Colonization explosion, which leads to inevitable contact with other intelligent life. Here's how the theory goes. If we agree with the core of Fermi's paradox that, statistically speaking, intelligent life should exist elsewhere, and also that the 9 steps of the Great Filter theory are necessary for intelligent life to encounter other intelligent life, we're left with a single conclusion. One of the 9 pieces of the Great Filter theory is significantly less likely to happen than we were originally led to believe. Hence, well, the filter. One popular theory is that we are our own worst enemy. Intelligent life doesn't fail to make contact with extraterrestrials because it doesn't want to, or because it couldn't eventually develop the necessary technology. Rather, intelligent life is almost guaranteed to destroy itself before it can make contact with other intelligent life. Hell, Fermi's quote comes from 1950, after we detonated the first nuclear weapons, but decades before North Korea's dirty bomb escapades in the mid-2020s, and we're still dealing with the fallout from the Russians' fission accident in '32. Intentional or not, it seems more and more likely that number 8 on that damn filter list was the rub, as Shakespeare would say. All this math, all this philosophy, all this reasoning, and we still didn't know what the hell to do when they finally showed up. About a century too late to let Fermi know, mind you, but they came nonetheless. We couldn't have done a damn thing about it either way. It was about 2 weeks after I had graduated from university. That's when they appeared. Literally. There wasn't any advanced warning, no attempt at orbital communication, nothing like that. For all I know, some goof in a billion-dollar radar station knew what was going to happen 30 seconds before the rest of us, but the point is, they began to appear. I saw the first one around 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I was in upstate New York with my family. Even with IP LTE roaming, there isn't much signal there, so I stayed away from social media for the most part. And, well, if I had been more interested in staring down at a phone than looking up at the sky, I'd probably deserve whatever we had coming. Sure, I joined the mass hysteria online right after, but I saw it with my own eyes first. I could see it on the horizon, a small movement out of the corner of my eye. I was in the car at the time, but I could see well enough. That small dot quickly grew into a large, metallic-looking circle, almost pancake-shaped, sitting almost above the horizon. I didn't know how far away the circular ship-looking thing was, but I could tell right away that this was huge, in more ways than one. We panicked. We thought the world was going to end. Nothing in our years of looking to the stars and wondering what was up there could have prepared us for an actual answer, and nobody had a clue how to respond. There was no manual, no guidebook, no real protocol. We had to write our own, though our new visitors ended up doing most of the legwork on that front. Like I said, at first, it was chaos. Pure and utter mayhem. Police and local government did the best they could to stop the rioting, but it still didn't take long for everyone to find out that this was not unique to us. Our country, that is. It appears that 3 ships had settled for U.S. cities in New York, San Francisco, and Dallas, while similar entities had chosen targets around Shanghai, London, Moscow, Paris, Madrid, Mumbai, major cultural and economic hubs around the world. Centuries of political unrest, and all of a sudden, every major country in the world had to come together to face, in one way or another, our very first extraterrestrial visitors. They scrambled jets, evacuated residential areas, deployed the National Guard, tried radioing to the ships, I guess. I'm not sure exactly how they went about establishing contact, but I know it didn't really work. The president practically collapsed under the pressure. Cabinet invokes the 25th, Vice takes control, press has another issue to worry about, nobody knows who's in command, state officials go rogue. Gray filter be damned, it seemed like someone else's step number 9 was going to be our downfall. Then, suddenly, amidst protests, pandemonium, and civil unrest of every kind, they called. The ships, they contacted us. The media told us they contacted the White House first, but I think they contacted every major government around the same time. How did that call go, exactly? Well, I think they took everyone by surprise. Maybe Hollywood has conditioned us so well to believe that aliens would come for a hostile takeover, maybe for our planetary resources. After every science fiction flick since the 40s told us there would be some barrier, some obstacle of language, culture, whatever to overcome, that's what we assumed would happen. Yet when the president picked up that phone and answered that call, it was in English. Perfect English, in fact, and believe me, I've heard recordings of it. They spoke Mandarin, too, and Portuguese and French and every other language they needed to. We will bear gifts. That's what they said. They said it to every president, every prime minister. Later, they used speakers of some kind. They blasted it out for everyone to hear. Weird sentence structure, I guess, but they definitely hadn't attacked us yet. That was good, I suppose. Only thing left to wonder was what those gifts actually were. Before I get to that, though, let me get back to the stars. I talked about stars earlier. Honestly, that was the only thing that seemed to really change. You kind of get used to the giant hovering circular ships, but they let off this weird bluish glow. Didn't really make any difference during the day, but it stole the night sky away in favor of constant twilight. It never really got dark anymore. there was always that blue glow on the horizon, a constant reminder of our visitors. We got used to it though, eventually. We had bigger problems than light cycles. 2 weeks after the spacecraft first appeared, they emerged. We saw them for the first time. Like the language shock, we were both stunned and not at all surprised to find out they looked astoundingly similar to us. Sure, you had to learn to ignore the semi-translucent, scaly skin they had, not to mention their vertical eyes and centered mouths, but, other than that, well, you could have run into them in church and not thought another second about it. We wanted something to call them, so they told us they were the Phinons. They gave coordinates of their home planet, too, but that didn't mean a whole lot to the majority of us. What did mean a lot, though, was that gift I mentioned earlier. That first message they broadcast to the entire planet. They said they wanted to solve our problems. Health, hunger, poverty. They said they could do it. And we believed them. Why shouldn't we? They clearly had superior technology to us. They hadn't made any negative intentions known, and as far as we could tell, they came through on their promises. Some religions even claimed the Phinons to be saviors. Sure, there were those that didn't trust them, but for the most part, the world went with the flow. I guess we didn't have much of a choice. They facilitated conflict resolution. They engaged nations in reasonable discourse. They provided medical technology well beyond our current capacity. And most importantly, they introduced us to Blend. Kind of a basic name, sure, but it was the ultimate superfood, the pinnacle of genetic food engineering, the perfect meal substitute. Once shown how to manufacture it, using their stock, of course, Blend could be distributed easily, efficiently, and most importantly, it contained the necessary nutrients, vitamins, and minerals to essentially solve world hunger. The Phinons didn't actively replace regular meals, per se. In fact, they facilitated existing agricultural development and made sure that everyone had access to quality Earth foods. It might seem too good to be true, but why does it have to be? Before those ships appeared in the sky, our species may as well still have been stuck on a simple question asked over a quiet lunch in 1950. If the Phinons had managed to break through the Great Filter, they must have facilitated some sort of peace. Earth spent decades under the fear of mutually assured destruction. Meanwhile, the Phinons were figuring out how to feed their hungry, shelter their homeless, heal their sick. This was a model species by all counts. I think the biggest reason that people went along with the whole operation was because life felt, for the most part, normal. There was no invasion of alien creatures, no green-headed figures to see in the grocery stores. Nobody felt robbed of culture or country. At the end of the day, there was no cause for alarm. Like they said, the Phinons came bearing gifts. We were just the happy recipients. Life was a haze. The world we had known fell to absolute shambles the second a foreign species made contact, and few cared to complain. Our world was flawed, and the Phinons could show us the light. Crime rates began to plummet, economic growth stabilized, foreign conflict rapidly resolved, globalization steadied. And through all of this, a sharp course correction in humanity's growth, all happening over a few months. Through all of it, the Phinon ships hovered, unwavering, perfectly still in the sky. They cast large shadows at dawn, covering swaths of land in shade for hours at a time. For all the good they did, we never forgot they were here. There had to be skeptics, though. There always do. There had to be someone to question why they would be so invested in curing world hunger, why anyone should care to drink Blend, why they would lend their medical technology. But for all the talk, the government couldn't do anything. No billion-dollar jet could take down a ship the size of a city, no hellfire barrage could send these foreigners back to whatever part of the galaxy from which they came. As I mentioned, it all seemed too good to be true. Until it wasn't. Exactly 8 months after the Phinons first made contact with us, we started dying. Humans, that is. Not confined to one country, one culture, nothing. We just started dropping dead. At first they were sporadic. A couple dozen bodies on the first day, maybe 100 on the second. But by the third day, they were everywhere. Corpses in wrecked cars, at work desks, sitting in front of their television. The Phinons had retreated to their ship, but they did not go silent. No, they did not. In fact, if anything, they got louder. Their single message was on constant blast. It played on every TV, every screen, every speaker on the globe. We will bear gifts. I was one of the lucky ones, if you could call me that. I didn't succumb to whatever hellish plague they brought on us. No. Instead, I watched 4 million people die across the globe in a single week. We started digging mass graves 8 days after the first people began dying. What was left of the US government enlisted any help they could. I spent weeks surveying land for grave sites with a Coast Guard unit. The world had spiraled back into chaos, into panic. People lost their spouses, their children, their friends, their family. Whatever the Phinons brought did not discriminate. Not by age, not by sex, by religion, by political view, by nothing. They all died, either way. The World Health Organization was running around like a damn chicken with its head cut off, trying to set up bullshit quarantines to stop a pandemic they knew nothing about. No autopsies revealed viral or bacterial remnants that could point toward a certain disease, known or otherwise. This was something else. I remember the NHS and WHO ads that started playing a couple weeks after the deaths began. Without a cure in sight, the best they could do was let everyone know the symptoms of this Phinon plague. When I was surveying with the Coast Guard, we'd have the radio on as we worked late into the night. Every 15 minutes, that damn ad would play, broken only by the incessant call from the Phinons. We will bear gifts. A woman with a British accent would come on the air reminding us to know the 4 F's of Phinon illness. 1. Fever. 2. Facial paralysis. 3. Fungal growth. And 4. Functional organ failure. We will bear gifts. Remember, always contact a local authority for help if you or a loved one is experiencing any symptoms. Do your civic duty and isolate yourself from those unaffected. This has been a message from the National Health Service. Kind of a bullshit acronym if you ask me, and definitely disgusting. It pales, however, in comparison to the stomach-churning image of the corpses themselves. It was always unsettling when you noticed a coworker's brow stiffen, that bumpy, uneven texture of fungal growth starting to appear on their necks. First, your immune system would recognize the presence of an invader and start heating up. Next, as the nervous system was targeted, you began to experience sporadic paralysis. A white fungus would start to break out, and finally, critical organ failure. At least you didn't have to put up with it for long. You'd be dead within 24 hours of exhibiting any symptoms. It didn't stop with those people's breath, though. The dead, the piles of corpses, they were covered in a white fungal growth that seemed to come from under their decaying skin layers, rotting through with a vile, pungent stench. I know, we should have thought it through more thoroughly. Should have played out the scenarios ahead of time, maybe even come up with a backup plan. But what the hell were we supposed to do? We've spent 100 years philosophizing, dreaming, imagining what a first encounter would be like, but in all honesty, what the hell do the empty words of a dead physicist mean for anyone when a mile-wide spaceship blots out the sun? What the hell were we supposed to do when they came to us with solutions, with answers? A way to heal the sick, a drink to feed the hungry. The dead, the fungus, the mass graves, they weren't the biggest problems we had. I wish that the tens of millions who died in the first few weeks of the plague had been the worst of our worries, because then, at the very least, it would have been a dead problem. No, I'm not talking about zombies. I don't mean to say that the Phinons finally discovered a magical technology that fulfilled Clarke's third law. I mean that the fungus was a sign of something else growing. Something much more alive and much more dangerous. Something breathing. Something sentient. The only resource they came for was us. Before we went underground for the last time, I saw one of the mass graves in person. We had been fairly rushed in its covering, but the football field-sized mound of dirt had practically disappeared, replaced instead by a disgusting hellscape of mangled limbs, rotting flesh, chest cavities cleft into by the creatures that would burst out from their inside. I guess it's better the people were already dead, at least. The optimist in all of us wanted to believe the Phinons when they first appeared. They spoke our language, they came in peace, they solved our problems, they even resembled us. They unified the Earth as one part of a vast galactic network. Inspiring stuff, really. But too few people considered the alternative. There are a couple problems with the Great Filter Theory, but here's the one I see as most disturbing. Yes, logically speaking, the Fermi paradox should lead us to believe that one of the 9 steps to galactic contact with intelligent life outside of our own is way less probable than we were originally led to assume. But let's focus on number 8 on that list, where we are right now. Or at least, where we were before the Phinons paid us a visit. I've only ever heard people talk about the Great Filter as a barrier to break, a final frontier to be conquered. We will truly have succeeded as a species if we can make contact with another intelligent form of life before we cause our own demise. What if demise is a good thing, though? What if the darkest parts of humanity, those that strive against the basic nature of self-preservation, serve a good far greater than we could know? World peace isn't the only way to prevent species eradication, I can tell you that much. I don't know the history of the Phinons, but I can tell you for a fact that they did not come in peace. If they had, well, I wouldn't be in a bunker, stuck underground surrounded by the last of a dying species at the hands of a galactic parasite. As I descended those concrete steps, knowing I would never breathe fresh air again, I looked up at the sky, at the tree line. It was the middle of the night, but the sky still glowed an eerie blue, offset in the center by the shadow of their ship, a black sun on the horizon. But what were we supposed to do? We will bear gifts. That "we" didn't refer to the Phinons. This was not a friendly message of welcome. It was a warning, a statement. The Phinons weren't here to protect us or to save any part of humanity. They were here to save their children, their offspring, their own species, using us merely to grow anew. We were hosts to them, though not of the voluntary kind. We were the hosts of their parasitic invasion, and half the world had already fallen to them. I don't know who this will reach, but if Fermi's paradox still holds any water, I know that, like us, the Phinons can't be alone either. Maybe someone else out there will get this message because, my God, do you need it? Someone needs it. Because if you aren't the ones knocking on a stranger's door, you're one step too far behind them, stuck on the wrong side of the Great Filter. If your species hasn't quite made it through, you should be damned scared of anyone who figured it out first.